Anna-Marie, very good to have you with us. Let me talk to you about what's going on in the auto space then. Danny just going through the good, the bad and the ugly. What have you learned through this earnings season about the sector and how it's dealing with a host of headwinds?
I think these results have been really reflective of the number of challenges that are facing car makers, because it's a real combination of weak demand in the major markets. You've also got some one-off charges for diesel charges in the case of Daimler, also replacing airbags. You've got restructuring charges for Ford. So there are so many different things that are really combining in these results, not to mention the R&D spend that was mentioned.
OK, Matt.
Well, I wonder about that R&D spend. How long is it going to take to pay off, Anna-Marie? Because it just doesn't seem like the infrastructure is even there with which that consumers need to buy these cars.
It's true. We are seeing still quite weak demand for these vehicles. You know, growth rates look good, but in a lot of countries it's from a very low base. And as you said, the infrastructure is a big part of this. Also, it's still a very expensive technology. There are still relatively few models available. So we would expect, at least over the next year or two, when you see a lot of these car makers who've announced their electrification plans actually getting these models to market, and there's more choice and hopefully more infrastructure to go with that, then we should start to see a turnaround in the electric market.
Who is going to deal with this lack of infrastructure effectively, Anna-Marie? Who is going to either benefit from it or fix this hole? Because to Matt's point, it seems very difficult to buy a car at the moment because you don't know whether to buy old technology or buy new technology for which there isn't sufficient infrastructure.
Yes, and it's this real chicken and egg situation.
And so the car makers, they benefit if someone fixes this, but yet they may not be the people to do so.
Yes, because in some countries we've seen a combination of governments and car makers themselves coming together. In some countries the car makers themselves have taken the initiative. So there's not really a clear path in how this should be done. Ideally, you want to see a combination of utilities and even former petrol suppliers coming in involved in this. So I think
BP's been involved, I know.
Yeah, Shell has a real big program going. So I think you really need a combination of everyone, because ultimately everyone could benefit.
Don't we see at some point these car makers bouncing back? I mean, there aren't too many outside competitors that have been able to come in and really make headway, with the exception of Tesla.
Yes, and I think in many ways you see the traditional car makers should have an advantage over some of these smaller startups, because they've got the production expertise, they've got bigger infrastructure. They should be able to just make changes to accommodate electric vehicles at relatively lower cost. So it could be a longer term play for them, but they should have some advantage.
What about the market in China then, Anna-Marie? Because you sort of see upside and downside to what's going on in China.
Yes, it's difficult at the moment because the government just brought in new emission standards, and car makers, dealers, pretty much everyone was unprepared for this because it was a year earlier than it was meant to be. So there is not a lot of inventory for people to buy that will actually comply with these standards. There was some very short-term upside because obviously there were a lot of offers for consumers as people were trying to get rid of this backlog of non-compliant vehicles. So yeah, China is going to be difficult for the rest of the year, because you've also got some cities that are saying, OK, we'll raise the quota on the number of cars that can be bought. But again, you've got the tariffs that are making the economic situation difficult. So it's a real challenge.